Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everybody. Relationships are everything in our lives. Think about it. We are social creatures. You have family relationships. You might have your partner, spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend relationship. You have your friends, relationships. You have your coworkers, relationships. It's all there. We also have emotional healing that needs to take place. It's my belief that we all have to heal from something, traumas from the past, all of that. Imagine emotional healing and those relationships, putting that all together. She wrote a book about that, and she helps people with this all the time. She's an amazing psychotherapist. Audrey Palmer joins us here on the program. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. This is so important. We minimize the emotional healing that many of us have to go through. Would you say that we all have something, if you really go to the core, something that we need to heal from?
So I used to have a saying that everyone you meet is going through something, so be kind. And everyone really is going through something. And when I talk to people from every single walk of life, whether they're wealthy, poor, whatever culture they're from, there's always a struggle. And yeah, we do need to understand who we are in order to heal from some of the past wounds. Some have been inflicted unknowingly, some deliberately, but wounds are wounds. And so, however we get them, we need to go through the process of healing.
I find it fascinating to look at this today
Okay.
because relationships are vital to emotional healing. That's what we're
Yes.
talking about. That's kind of the baseline for your book.
Yes.
But when you look at it the other way, many of us have to heal because of the relationships. Does that make sense?
It's ironic, isn't it?
It
It's
is.
almost, yeah. But we are created, made to live in community. And as we were getting ready to start, I was thinking about the Jungle Book, where the little boy was raised by animals. And um it, it's a nice story, but it's probably not a realistic story. Of all the animals of the earth, humans are the only one who require the interaction as well as the adult involvement to survive. Where other animals can pop out and in a couple of weeks they're walking and finding food and being with their families. But humans need adults to make sure that they make it.
Right.
Yeah, so we it's ironic, but it's true.
Hmm. What
We need
about
each other.
we need each other? Yeah, and that's where I started. We are social creatures. We
Absolutely.
crave the connection. Unfortunately or fortunately, with that connection comes emotional challenges, and we need to heal from them. It's like,
Hmm.
um, let's talk about some of those emotional wounds that we might need to heal from.
So, I mean, when people look at past traumas, where they can end up with rejection, there are people who've been physically hurt, sexually hurt, betrayal, and this can be from anyone, from a friend to a parent. But the basic thing is we all need. Um, that healthy relationship from infancy in order to become productive adults, because these early interactions establish patterns of how we relate to other people. In my practice, one of the things that I share with folks is patterns seem to repeat themselves. And even when individuals say, "Oh, that never happened in my family," as soon as we develop rapport and a relationship, then it all comes out and it holds. Patterns do repeat themselves. And so whatever patterns we have with our families of origin tend to play themselves out in friendships, in romantic relationships, in whatever way. And so it's important to really understand. And so when I work with someone, Steve, I want to look at their earliest relationships from age 1 to about 7.
Mm,
We are figuring out how we're going to survive the community, how we're going to navigate the problems, how we're going to make sure we survive. And so when someone at age, 25 starts to react in a certain way, and they're like, I don't understand. That's not supposed to happen. Or I'll go to a very practical one that people can understand. So parents are violent with each other when the child is young. As the child gets older, somehow they decided to work out their issues and they're no longer involved in violent behavior. Their child then reacts in a violent way and they don't understand because those patterns had already been established. The child has already learned when someone angers you, you lash out at them. And so they have to go back, understand where they got that from. They need to, and it's not a bad thing. We all need to survive, and then how to unlearn those patterns of behavior.
Would you say also that in those situations, many of us go to a place of comfort and familiarity? For example, let's say a woman was maybe verbally abused by her father. She would witness mom and dad fighting, kind of tumultuous, and then she moves on to a marriage, and now she tries to push the button of her partner, and she doesn't know why she's doing it, and he could be very passive, like, what are you doing? What? And she's just repeating it because she's comfortable with it. That's what I know. I don't want to fight with you. She's not she's not cognizant of that, but she's saying, this just feels good because
Yeah.
this is what I know. This is how I was raised.
I'm glad you said that because that's exactly what happens. And that's what I mean by patterns repeat themselves. And so when a woman is involved in an abusive relationship, it's very likely that she lived that experience and her partner also lived that experience. So who you're looking for is also looking for you because we all want to go to a place of equilibrium where we are comfortable with our space. And as you said very rightly, if the person isn't abusive, then the other partner starts to aggravate the situation to get them to a place where they are comfortable. And so the pattern keeps going. And so I do say to couples, you can leave and find someone else. And it holds even when people cross cultures, cross, different statuses, and the
Sure.
same thing happens. Where a woman marries a man who is not of her race and says, I don't understand. I thought it was only my family. And I'm like, no, it's everyone. And so
Mm.
my suggestion always to people is work on the relationship you have because you will find someone else that is just like that person. And if they're not like them, you will create them because we do go through the process of co-creating each other.
Or you'll attract them. How many times you hear
Yes.
from women, I don't know what's going on. I meet the same kind of guys. I don't know, because you probably attracted them. And I want to share a friend of mine
Yeah.
went through a divorce, and it's almost textbook illustrating what you're saying. And I know the family, so I got a good view of it. But in his situation, one day his wife just said, I want a divorce.
Right.
Blindsided the entire family. But then when you trace it back, her father did the same exact thing in her family, kind of just vaporized, disappeared. There was animosity with her father for many years. Then my friend got married to her, and then she got back with her father, and things were really good. Fantastic. Family functions, I'd be there, I'd see it. And then he got cancer. And then he started degrading. And then he passed away. And the year that he passed away is when she dropped the bomb and said, I want to get divorced. When he traced it all back, he found out that she had been cheating along the way. And it ties into, around the cancer situation with her father that went on for quite a few years. But here's the end of the
Right.
story. Here's the end of the story. He shows me a picture of the man she's with now. It's her father. It looks
Yes.
identical to her
Right.
father, same ethnic background, same hobbies, same everything. So
Right.
that's what she knew. And I say to him, do you even bring it up to her? He's like, she's not even going to listen. She doesn't realize anything. And
Right.
I don't want to say textbook, but I mean, the facts speak for themselves. Um, there it comes from your childhood. And I 1 billion% agree with you, as many others do,
Mhm.
between 1 and 7. or birth in seven
Oh,
is
absolutely, absolutely.
it's all there. Whatever you experience, however you dealt with, whatever you dealt with, that charted the course for your adult life. There it is. And those are the traumas.
And for me as a therapist and also as a Christian, I do believe in change. And so are we always doomed to kind of live the same life? No,
No.
we have the ability to make changes, but we have to make the choice to change. And that's not the easiest thing. The process of change. And sometimes, I mean, as you talk about women in abusive relationships, and people always say, why do they stay? Because it takes a while for one, people to understand. If you take your friend, she's probably not going to see how she's recreated her own patterns
Yeah,
in her family's
completely.
origin. And
Right.
so it takes a while to one understand, to two accept that this is what you're living with, and the other is to actually cognitively and consciously think, "Oh my gosh, I lived in a chaotic home. My parents were chaotic," because they're our heroes, and nobody wants to think, "Oh, they weren't the best people in the world." Because the first statement people always say to any therapist, my parents were the greatest, my childhood was the greatest, there were no problems at all. And it could be true, but there are other things that can trigger.
Mm.
And so it takes a while before someone can make the decision to change, but change is possible.
Change is only possible until you realize that you need to change.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I know we gave examples of women, but it goes both ways. And one of them, you don't want to leave a relationship that doesn't support you. And let's say you're a man or a woman, but you stay. And you brought that up before. Whether there's
Mhm.
abuse or it's just not the best relationship, well, let's go back. Let's usually, if you trace it back, that person may or probably has a fear of abandonment and
Mhm.
doesn't want to be alone. Now trace it back. What happened? Their parents probably got divorced, or there was something there between one and seven, somewhere in that territory.
But it doesn't even have to be trauma within the family. It
Sure.
could be trauma against a whole cultural group. And so when you look at someone whose parents had to flee a country, let's say, because they were being treated differently, and so as an
Yeah.
adult, this person is struggling with how do I move up in the organization? They see others being promoted ahead of them who are not as talented, not as bright, not as productive, but there's a spark that they have that they seem to lack. So
Mm.
when it's traced back, and I was able to do that with someone, it was, well, we can't tell people what our religion is because they will hurt us because of that. And so this young man grew up in life and he said, even in my sports team, I never wanted to excel. I just wanted to be kind of in the pack, right? So
Mm.
when you are not interested in showing yourself and shining your own light, no one's going to magically say, oh, let's try that one. And so then, because of the messages he received as a young person, and even as a young adult, you can't let anyone know because it's going to be dangerous for you. Then he then starts to he takes that message and he lives it out. So I can't shine, but his desire to excel is hampered by this inability to show himself. And if you
Wow.
do show yourself, what will that mean? So there are lots of messages that we receive that continues to control our behavior. And in the book, I talk about emotional healing in three ways with God, self, and others. And sometimes we do need healing from a religious perspective because unfortunately, the church has created a magical God. And so when people don't get their prayers answered immediately, they become angry. And this cannot be a God, and we don't have a proper perspective. Or the other piece is in the life of a child, the parent is then representative of the highest power. But when a child is being abused, whether physically, sexually, or in any other way, their concept of God is going to be someone harsh and difficult. And so they struggle with really acknowledging, is this right for me? Is this a God thing for me at all? And so I do take a passage where it says, love, the greatest commandment is love yourself, love God, and then love others as you love yourself. And so
Mm.
implicit in all of that is there has to be a love of self in order to love other people. And we struggle with loving the self, warts and all. And we need to be able to do that in order um, to be able to love others in a really clear way.
It's such a cliche that it's been said that you need to love yourself before you can truly love others. But until you figure that out, you're not going to get it. You're not going to
Hmm.
understand it. And I speak from experience. I never got it. And we all are governed by never wanting to have a big ego or like somebody's full of themselves. So when you say those things like, you know what? I love myself.
Yeah,
I'm awesome. A good
right.
person. I'm a good person. Those words usually don't come out of somebody's mouth. Go in front of a mirror tomorrow, this morning, tonight, and say that to yourself. It's almost like uncomfortable, but it's true. You really
Yeah,
can't unless you got yourself. And interesting, Audrey, the points you bring out about God and
yes,
how somebody's perception of God is kind of based on their upbringing. Never heard that
yes,
said before. Wow. I
yeah,
want to ask you now, we've identified these traumas and how they can pop
yes.
up and where they come from. How does relationships impact the healing of those traumas?
So, oh, that's loaded. We don't have enough time to talk about that. But here's the thing.
Get the book, people.
Get the book. That's right. But here's the thing. Um, so if a person is involved in a relationship, my suggestion to them, and sometimes I shoot myself in the foot because if they're in private practice with me, I say, look, you can't make these changes without your partner. And so my suggestion is that you enter couples therapy and the two of you together look at how you've been bonded by trauma, and how you, and sometimes they want me to kind of give them activities to do with their partner to help move them along, but it's very different. And so, at one, it's affected by the relationships that we have. And so, if you're married, dating, or planning to date, enter into a therapy with your partner so that the two of you can work on those issues together. There are times that the individual has to be strengthened, one, to recognize that they may be involved in a toxic relationship. And that may mean a parent who continues to rely on them to parent them. And so, if a mother has grown up to be very needy and really hard to function as the adult, the child grows up and they become enmeshed. And as the child is realizing they don't have a life, they don't have relationships, and they struggle to maintain, then how do we then separate the child from the parent? Like remove the enmeshment so that the child can survive. And there are people who struggle with that because in order to do that, they have to then confront the individual and not in a clamorous way, because I think when people hear the word confrontation, they
Hmm.
think it's going to be a big fight.
Right.
But that's not it at all. They're gentle ways that we can confront. And sometimes there is a need to separate from those people in order to gain strength yourself. And I know it sounds almost counterintuitive, but in order to you've heard the saying, you can't save a drowning man because they'll pull you down and you'll both die together.
Sure.
Sometimes there is a need to kind of walk away, take perspective, work on your own issues, and really it's going to sound cliche again, CBT, and all it means is cognitive behavior therapy, and all it is changing your mind, changing the way of thinking, and so therapists will give tasks for people to do, ways to reflect on um, how they've been treating people, how they allow people to treat them, in order to start making those changes.
It's interesting to say these words. How have my relationships really shaped my emotional life? And if you
Right.
sit with that for a second, there's a lot going on.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
There are. lots of young people are now just entering to therapy to understand themselves. And sometimes when I talk to some who are young and they're just even trying to figure out their own values, and I think it's great for them because they're with the no, I don't know about where you live, but in Toronto, where I live, we have a huge immigrant population because people have come over. And I think Toronto is rated as the biggest immigrant community in the world. And
Wow.
so, oh yeah, the values that their parents have may not be their own as they've interacted and intersected with other people. And so they're trying to figure out who they are in light of the community, the context of their family, and their own cultures.
I spoke with somebody yesterday that lives in Canada,
Right.
um, of Indian descent, and
Uh-huh.
her one of her biggest challenges is her parents' values doesn't they don't match hers now. And also, when we say the word values, does that also mean boundaries, or can it?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And so if we go back to the enmeshment, where there are families who believe that everyone must know everything about everyone, and in a culture where people private and value their privacy, those values will seriously bump up against the parents' need to protect, care for their children, and even if they're adult children with their own wives or husbands and their own children, they still feel obligated. And so there's the push and pull and the struggle. How do I maintain my home, be the parent of my child while my parents are still trying to parent me?
I wanted to mention that before because you reminded me
Uh-huh.
that I heard this term a while ago, and it just came back to me.
Uh-huh.
We need to reparent ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's almost as if you need to address the cliche inner child within you that had, gone through some trauma or um, absorbed something and that turned into a trauma, but you need
Hmm.
to be your own parent again. And
Yes.
I did hypnotherapy. That was one of the game changers for me. Um,
Okay.
and I knew right away, not that my childhood was really bad, but there were
Hmm.
definitely stuff there, like us, well, all of us. And I said, take me back to my childhood. And I confronted myself as a child and as an adult, confronting myself and reassuring myself that I'm there
Right.
for you. I got
Right.
you. You know,
Right.
dude, no worries. We're all good here.
Right.
And that's what's going on. It's a piece of what's going on in our minds here today. But very interesting how you look at it from relationships helping you heal from a lot of this.
Right.
It's amazing when you think about it.
One of the things that I also talk about in the book, and I really believe it, I'm going to create something called the F word, but it's the ability and the need to forgive. Because sometimes the anger that we're holding on to, the frustration we're holding on to, the person who we believe has done it to us, they have no idea. They've moved on, and there you are stuck with
Yeah.
this inability to form relationships and to do stuff. And so I do talk about the need to forgive and to move on. And it's not to say they were okay in what they did, it's that it frees you up to move on from the anger.
Uh, a whole other podcast right there.
Yes.
And that and gratitude, I mean, huge,
Yes.
huge in helping you move your life forward. Now you have this wonderful book and it's based on everything we're talking about today in
Yes.
terms of healing traumas through relationships.
Right.
um, how do we find that book, Audrey?
So it's on Amazon, but I mean, it's there are lots of books with the name Emotional Healing, and so there is a link, a scan that you can download. It takes you right to my website, and you can
Sure.
click on the book, and it takes you right into Amazon. I
Awesome.
think it's a good book. Please get it. For those who are Christian oriented, there are passages that will talk about the need to heal, and
Hmm.
that's really important.
Love it. We're going to put that QR code up here and also the address for your website. If you're listening to this and not watching it, what is your website, Audrey?
GenesisClinicalServices.ca. That's GenesisClinicalServices.ca. Ca. That's. Genesis Clinical Services dot C A. 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 That's.
Thank you for today. Everything we talked about is so important. If you feel stuck in life, you're in relationships that don't support you, you don't know why, or deep down inside, you just know this is not right.
Right.
Take that step. Get the
Right.
book, or even at the very least, reach out to Audrey and start the conversation. It's a game changer. By the way, want to share before we go? I even did hypnotherapy for forgiveness.
Oh, wow, that's great. I'd love to hear about that.
I didn't even know it existed.
So
Thank you for.
the other thing that I'd like to say before we go, I know we have to wrap up. If people would like to send in questions, I'd be
Oh,
more than
sure.
happy to answer them.
Love that. Instant feedback, Steve@gmail.com. And we can keep it anonymous as well. Just reach out
Yes.
and we'll tackle those next time we get together. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you. My pleasure. Take
We'll be
care.
right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.